Desperate. We're in the middle of chapter 7 here in V'isha Achas. So we've been talking about Ki ha-mitzvah hazos asher anochi mitzav chayim lo niflesi mimcha v'lo rechoikahi. We've been talking about what Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people for his passing, that this mitzvah is this mitzvah that I command you today is not far from you. It's not lo niflesi mimcha, it's not removed from you, v'lo rechoikahi, it's not distant from you. So we said, what's mitzvah hazos? What's this mitzvah? So first we explained that this mitzvah is tshuva. And what does it mean that tshuva is not, why the double expression that it's not far and it's not removed, not distant, not removed? So we said because distance implies a connection between two things. And being removed means that it's completely removed, it's even further away. So why these two expressions? Because there are two aspects of tshuva. There's the lower tshuva and the higher tshuva. The lower tshuva is what we say is distant from you, and the higher tshuva is removed from you. But to further elaborate this point and to explain this point, the Rebbe brings another interpretation of Ki ha-mitzvah hazos. What is this mitzvah? So the idea that it talks about tshuva, that mitzvah hazos refers to tshuva, that's from the Ramban and other commentaries. Rashi and others explain that mitzvah hazos means all of the mitzvahs, all of Torah mitzvahs. All of Judaism is not distant and not removed. So what is, when we talk about mitzvahs, what's this idea of distant and removed? So we explained that when we talk about mitzvahs, there's mitzvahs as they are in God's wisdom. And as they are in God's wisdom, even though so God's wisdom is infinite, our wisdom is finite and limited. So, but since we have wisdom, God has wisdom, there's some kind of a commonality between the two, as distant as they are. So therefore we say that it's distant. So Torah and mitzvahs are distant from us. That refers to the level of Torah mitzvahs as they are in God's wisdom. But mitzvahs are not only in God's wisdom, they're also beyond wisdom, because mitzvahs originate in God's will. Will is beyond reason, is higher than reason. And so when we say that mitzvahs are in God's reason, when we're talking about in God's will, as mitzvahs are Ratzon Elyon, the divine will, so that's removed from us. That's completely infinite, that's completely transcendent, and that's totally beyond us, and that's what we say is removed from us. So we said that mitzvahs are nifleis and rechoika. They're distant and they're removed, and that refers to these two aspects of mitzvahs as they are in God's wisdom, and mitzvahs as they are beyond it, as they are in God's will. And we explained that this is the idea of alpaim shana kadma Torah la'olam, that when we talk about Torah, so Chazal say, based on the pasuk vayetz le'amim, that something. Whatever. The point is that the Chazal learn that Torah, it says Torah precedes creation, precedes the world by 2,000 years. So there's Torah as it is kadma la'olam, Torah as it's beyond creation, and then there's Torah as it's 2,000 years beyond creation, meaning that there's different levels. Torah as it's totally removed from creation reality, and then as it comes into reality, and as it becomes connected to reality, it gets closer and closer, depending on the level, the lower level. So we see this idea of Torah as it relates to us and as it's beyond us. So when the pasuk says that lo niflesi rechav lo rechoikahi, that it's not distant and it's not removed, what is it telling us? That really Torah and mitzvahs on every level are really distant and removed from creation, from reality. But mimcha, from you, that's lo niflesi and not rechoika. From us, it's not. What is that level that we're referring to? So again, as we said, removed is the level of, distant is the level of mitzvahs as they are in God's understanding, and removed is as they are beyond it. Now we're middle of chapter 7, the second paragraph of chapter 7. So we can add and explain that this, when we say, the pasuk says that it's not removed and it's not distant, b'bchinas pele v'richuk, v'gam later mitzvah kashem mitzad atzmam koydem riyudasam she'az ein shaykh lemer leim gam later de pele v'richuk. So when we say that the Torah mitzvahs are not distant from us and not removed from us, that's referring to those levels, the level of ratzin and the level of chachma. But really, there's a higher level of Torah. There's a level of Torah that can't be referred to even as distant or as removed. Like we said when we talked about the Torah, Alpayim Shana Kadma Torah La'olam, and we said that this idea that when you say that Torah is distant from you, when we're contrasting earlier the difference between saying something is distant, something is removed. So we said when you say something is distant, it implies that there's a connection, but it's so high, it's so much higher that it's distant, it's very far away. And then you have something is removed, that's already where there is no connection between the two. So we say it's removed. But really, even when you say something is removed, that also implies a connection. You put the two things in the same sentence, so then there's a connection between them. But then there's Torah as it's beyond even being referred to in this terminology. There's Torah as it can't be referred to in relation to us, that it's distant from us or removed from us. It's totally beyond our reality. And so there's no describing it in a context of the gap between us and it, because it's totally removed from all of that. That's Torah in its essence. So that's a third. So this is a third level we've just introduced. There's Torah as it's in Chachma. So even though it's Chachma Elyon, it's the Eibish's Chachma, so it's infinitely beyond and distant from ours, but we could say it's distant. It's still a concept of Chachma. It's still in Pnimi. It's an internalized kind of a concept. And then you have Torah as it's Ratzona Elyon, as it's God's will. And in God's will, that's already transcendent. That's Makif, and so that's removed from us. But then there's Torah as it's beyond even Ratzon, as it's rooted in God's essence, where it's rooted in the Eibish's essence. We're going to get into a little bit later. We're going to start getting into this concept a little bit more. Whenever we refer to any type of, any level of godliness with some kind of terminology, whenever we apply any kind of terminology or explanation or definition, so we're already not talking about the highest levels. Because the highest level in God's essence, there is no terminology. It defies any kind of description. If it could be described, then it's not the essence. So there's a level of Torah that's beyond description in terms of its relationship with us. It's rooted in Hashem's essence. So that you can't even call distant or removed. It's beyond any of those descriptions. It's beyond any connection with our reality. So that even this level of Torah mitzvahs, as it is in God's essence, as they are alone in Hashem's essence, that also is not distant and removed from us. Because at Mount Sinai, when God gave us the Torah, He gave us all the levels of Torah. Even that level of Torah, as it is on its own, which is higher than it is as it comes to be connected. In other words, not even, the Rebbe says, before its descent to be connected to the world. In other words, not even as it is within the world, but as it's merely as it has a connection. Till the highest level where God and Torah are one. So where Torah is completely one with God, in the Eibishter's oneness, even that level was given to us at Mount Sinai. So what we have here is three levels, or three stages that we've explained, that the pasuk is referring to when it says it's not distant, it's not removed. There are three levels. There's the level of Torah as it comes into Chachma, as it's lower down into God's divine wisdom, and wisdom already is within. That's already connection to creation, because Chachma is already the first stage of Hishtalshlus, of creating. So there's Torah as it's there, but in that level, it's obviously removed from us. It's distant from us. Then there's Torah as it is beyond creation, as it is in Ratzon. But Ratzon, in God's will, that also, there's already a connection. That's already starting a movement towards something else. When you say you want something, so the thing that you want, even though the will is all within yourself, but the thing that you want, so you're being drawn towards it. So there's already some kind of a connection. But then there's Torah as it's removed from divine will, as it's totally removed from that, defies any kind of description, and even that level of Torah is also not distant from us. How is it that even that level of Torah that's beyond even being referred to as distant or removed, how is that connected to us as well? How do we have access, in other words, to it? Because at Mount Sinai, at Mountain Torah, God gave us the entire Torah in its entirety. All the levels of Torah, all aspects of Torah, even the level where Torah, where God and Torah are one. Okay, so this is, as we explained, Ki mitzvah Hazos refers to mitzvahs, and Torah mitzvahs. But then, remember, we started by discussing the Pirush HaRamban, that mitzvah Hazos refers to tshuva. So I think that the reason we went off and discussed the mitzvahs is because it's just laid out better. In this way, it's easier to understand the different stages, because in mitzvahs, in Torah mitzvahs, you find, as Torah mitzvahs are in understanding, as they're beyond understanding, as they're even beyond that, it's sort of, there's more of an approach to it and we can understand these three levels a little bit more. They're a little bit more contrasted. But when we talk about tshuva, as we already explained earlier when we introduced tshuva, the idea of tshuva is already higher than Torah. Why? Because, how do we see? Because tshuva has the capacity to fix something that was broken. So mitzvahs are one level. Tshuva that can repair the whatever you broke within mitzvahs means that it's on a higher level. So tshuva itself operates or exists on a level even beyond Torah and mitzvahs. It's on a higher level than it. So tshuva itself is entirely a transcendent kind of a concept. So here, now that we've explained how it is with Torah and mitzvahs, where we find an imminent concept of mitzvahs, an inyan pnimi, where it comes into wisdom and into understanding, even though we're talking about supernal wisdom. And then, as it is beyond wisdom, as it is in Ratzin, but we said tshuva is in Bala Ratzin. So tshuva itself resides on a plane that's beyond even Ratzin, even beyond will. So here we can now apply what we just said about about mitzvahs. We can apply it back to tshuva as well. So that's chapter 8. The same can be said with regard to the interpretation, the commentary that explains that this mitzvah refers to tshuva, specifically the fact that we say that tshuva is pela and richuk, meaning that it's distant or removed. That's how tshuva comes to be drawn down into this world. But tshuva, as it is alone, you can't even apply these terms of pela and richuk. So even though we've said that tshuva exists on a higher plane, but still the fact that tshuva is given to us, that we have the ability to do tshuva, meaning that tshuva is an instrument, a tool that was given to be used by us. So tshuva has to come down onto a lower level, it has to come down and be connected to us. So we're saying that even tshuva, as it's connected to us, is pela and richuk. Essentially, really, it's removed or distant. Right? And that's what the pasuk, the chiddush of the pasuk is that it's not removing this. We have access to it as well. But there's also a level of tshuva, as tshuva is on its own, beyond how it is applied to us. Beyond it's coming and being applied and given to us to be used. So tshuva, even as it's beyond these descriptions of pela and richuk, as we explained by mitzvahs. And even though obviously tshuva, when we say that tshuva is removed or distant, so obviously that's a whole different level of removed and distant than when we're talking about mitzvahs. Because as we just explained, tshuva exists on a higher plane than mitzvahs. So if mitzvahs are removed, that's a lower level. But when we say that tshuva is removed, the level that we're talking about in relation to us is there's a much greater distance. It's much more removed than we're talking about when we're saying the Torah mitzvahs.
So what's further? The tshuva?
Tshuva is further.
Shouldn't the mitzvahs be further away? Because tshuva is easier than your mitzvah.
Really? Okay. That's interesting. It says even tzaddikim have to do tshuva.
It's like far-fetched that we should be able to do something like that.
Yeah,
tshuva.
We have guilt. That's what tshuva.
No, but the fact that you can do an affair and then go back and turn it over and make it good is like something crazy. Much crazier than you going and keeping Shabbos.
In order to repair something, you need to introduce something higher. So if tshuva could repair mitzvahs, the mistakes you made with mitzvahs, then tshuva is on a higher level than it. Right? So that when we say that what's the distance between Torah and mitzvahs with us, is that mitzvahs exist on a plane of divine wisdom and in divine will. But as we said in chapter 4, that tshuva exists in Bal Haratzin. It's not God's will. It is within the Bal Haratzin, the one who desires himself. So obviously, the distance and the remove, when we say pela and richuk, that terminology with regard to tshuva is even greater than as it applies to Torah and mitzvahs. And nevertheless, this term of pela, of removed, and especially this idea of richuk, of distance, even as it's in its highest level, as vast as we want to make the distance between in the terms of pela and richuk, that it's distant or removed, as far as it's going to be, ultimately we're still coming back to a term and relating it back to us, meaning there's some kind of a relationship, there's some kind of a connection. So when we say that tshuva is loy nifleisi v'loy rechaika, So really, tshuva is nifla and rachik. Tshuva, that's the point of the verse. It's telling us that while tshuva itself is removed and distant from us, nevertheless from you it's not. Why? We'll get back to. We explained already. We'll get back to it in a moment. So there's a level of tshuva that we can refer to as removed, and there's a level of tshuva we can refer to as distant, and that's what the pasuk is telling us. It's not. So now the Rebbe adds that you could say that really there's a level of tshuva that you can't even call removed or distant. It's so high. It's rooted in the Baal Ratzin so deeply that you can't even call it removed or distant. It doesn't exist in relationship to us. You can't use it. Right. And now we're applying it also back to tshuva. But with tshuva it's a little harder to comprehend because in tshuva, to begin with tshuva is already removed from us. Because in Torah and mitzvahs we say there's the lower level, there's as it's in wisdom, then there's as it's in will, and then there's as it is essential.
There's a pattern here.
There is exactly. There's a parallel where that's what we're.
It's not really.
Correct.
It's not really
Yeah.
Then it's totally unrelated to, but really.
No, so okay, because we're working from the back, we're coming from the end result. The pasuk tells us it's not removed from us. So we're getting into that conversation by saying, why is the pasuk telling us it's not removed from us? Because really it is removed, and that's the chiddush that the pasuk is telling us that it's not really removed. But this concept that it should be removed, this concept of a relationship between us and it's distant, it's removed, it's far, it's close, all that implies that there's still some kind of a connection. So the Rebbe is saying when we're saying that it's accessible by us, that we can access it, we're talking about even the highest level, even the level that you can't even call removed or distant. It's so high that you can't even refer to it in relation to you because it's totally it's not just removed. You can't even use the term removed. It exists on a different level. So So when we say that tshuva is distant or removed, that's already tshuva as it already is intended to be applicable to us. And still we're saying, the pasuk is telling us that even the higher level of tshuva as it is totally unrelated to us, as it is essentially, even that is accessible. Just as we said at the end of chapter 7 about mitzvahs, the same is true with regard to tshuva. That a kavanah b'zeh tshuva k'meishu b'pchinas pelav v'richuk v'gam la tshuva k'meishu mitzad sharsha b'bal haratzin. Shalamayla matar de pelav v'richuk. Just as we applied to mitzvahs, and we said that mitzvahs, when we say that mitzvahs refers to Torah mitzvahs, that when we say that it's not distant and it's not removed, we're not only talking about the levels that are distant and removed, but even the level that you can't even call distant and removed, Torah as it's kulachad with the Eibishter. So the same is true now with regard to tshuva, that when we say it's not distant and removed, we're not only talking about those levels that we can call distant or removed, but even the higher level of tshuva as it's totally beyond all that. As it is in its source, beyond even that description. That even this higher level of tshuva, it's not distant and it's not removed. And this is why how do we see this? With this idea, the Rebbe is saying, why is it that we're telling you that when we say it's not distant, it's not removed, we went through a whole thing to say that there's a level of tshuva that's distant and removed. And the pasuk is telling us it's not distant and it's not removed. And we're not only referring to those two levels, we're even referring to the higher level that you can't even call distant and removed. How do you get there? So that's what the Rebbe explains here at the end of chapter 8, because the pasuk starts and says, Asher anoichi mitzav chayim. That this mitzvah, that anoichi is mitzav chayim. Anoichi, that I am commanding you. What's anoichi? Anoichi represents God's essence. It's a reference to God's essence. Why? Because Anoichi, when you say I, there's no description, there's no name, there's no description, there's no definition. It's just I, as I am essentially. So it's an allusion to God's essence. So if Hashem is saying that I'm commanding you today, so meaning all the levels, even the levels included in the I, even as they are included within Atzmos, even there, where they're beyond any kind of description, definition, even that is also given to you, even that is not distant and removed from you. Why is it? Why is it that even that all these levels, the levels that should be removed from us, even the level that's even beyond that, why is it that we have access to these levels? So that he explains in chapter 9. How are we doing on time? We have 10 minutes? Okay, chapter 9. So the reason for this, the reason why we have access to all these levels, the pasuk is telling us that we can reach all these levels that are distant, that are removed from us. Why is it? Because at Mount Sinai, at the giving of the Torah, when Hashem spoke and said, Anoichi Havaya Lekecha, I am God your God, Nasa came, B'kol echad v'echad Yisrael, the Eibishter became the personal God of each and every one of us. Shanoichi al yidei shenimshach b'Havaya, Anoichi, I am, as God in his essence, comes down into Havaya, who Alekecha is your God. And what's Alekecha? Keichacha v'chayusecha. Your strength and your life force. So what does this mean? When the pasuk says the Ten Commandments begin with Anoichi Hashem Alekecha, I am God your God. Alekecha is in the singular. When Hashem is talking to the people, he should have said Anoichi Hashem Alekechem, I am God your God in the plural, because he was talking to a group of people. But he says Anoichi Hashem Alekecha in the singular. So Chazal tell us what does this mean? Because every person came out saying Imi Hadibrim, that Eibishter spoke to me individually. Everybody came away from the experience saying that God spoke to me personally. That's what it's alluded to when it says, Anoichi Hashem Lekecha, I'm your God. The Eibishter spoke to every single one of us individually. To every single person individually. So, meaning that it's not just a collective connection that was established by Mount Sinai, that Hashem became the God of the people as a collective, but every individual, that everything God said, he applied to every single individual. That anything that was said was given to each and every single one of us as an individual. What was given to us as an individual? So what are the first words of the Ten Commandments? Anoichi Hashem Alekecha. I am God your God. So here we have three terms. Anoichi, Havaya, and Alekecha. Three terms. Anoichi, we just explained, Anoichi refers to Misha. Anoichi, that refers to God in his essence. Havaya refers to the level of God. That's a name of God already. That's a name that's beyond, that's the transcendent nature of God. That's God as he's creator, as he's beyond creation, as he's transcendent, as past, present, and future are the same. Hoya, hoya, v'yakecha. That's one of the reasons we say Havaya. Havaya also means as a creator or from emanator, everything comes from him. So that's God as he's beyond creation. So there's God as he's in his essence. Then there's God as he's beyond creation. And then there's Alekecha as God, Elikim, which represents, Elikim b'gematria teva, is teva, that's nature. Elikim is God as he is embedded within creation. The creative force within creation. The life force of creation. So Anoichi is hard. So there's Anoichi, that's Hashem in his essence, that's even removed from being transcendent, even removed from being higher than creation. That's as he is alone within himself, for himself, and nothing else outside. Then there's Havaya, as God is transcendent, as he's beyond creation. And then there's Alekecha. So what happens at Mount Sinai? At Mount Sinai, what happens is Hashem says, Anoichi Havaya Alekecha. That even though we are human beings, created finite creatures, nevertheless, Havaya is Alekecha. Our life force, our inner life force comes from Havaya, from that transcendent level. But not just Havaya, it comes from Anoichi. Because it's Anoichi Havaya. It's just that it comes through, so it's Anoichi, God's essence. As his essence comes down into being, into creating, that's Havaya. And as it comes within creation, Elikim, into Elikim. So at Mount Sinai, what happens? Anoichi becomes Alekecha. The level of Anoichi, God in his essence, becomes our life force as we are living and breathing and living within creation, within nature, within the created reality. I'm sorry?
That's how we access the highest level.
So the highest level is already embedded within us. It came into us. That's the idea of Anoichi Havaya Alekecha. But if that's the case, so we have a question. The question is, a Torah mitzvahs, it says, by Matan Torah, when Hashem gives us all the mitzvahs, it says, Anoichi Havaya Alekecha. And as he says in the parentheses, Anoichi al yidei shenimshach b'Havaya. Anoichi as it comes through Havaya to being Alekecha. When we say ki ha-mitzvah hazois asher Anoichi mitzavcha hayom, when we're talking about tshuva, this mitzvah tshuva that I've given you, and who gives it to us? Just Anoichi. It doesn't say Anoichi Havaya Alekecha, noisein lecha, mitzavcha. It says, ha-mitzvah hazois asher Anoichi mitzavcha. Just Anoichi. There's no middle level here. It's not coming through anything. It's not passing through any other level. It's Anoichi as I am. As Hashem is Anoichi, without any other stages, without any other progression. Anoichi, as he's Anoichi, is mitzavcha hayom. So when it comes to tshuva, we're saying Anoichi mitzavcha, without any other levels. When it comes to Torah mitzvahs, it says Anoichi Havaya Alekecha. That how do we access Anoichi? Through Havaya. So how can we say that this idea of tshuva, that Anoichi is that we can reach the highest level, even the level as it is within Anoichi? That's true maybe about tshuva, but how is it true about all the other mitzvahs? Where all the other mitzvahs, we only get to them through Anoichi Havaya Alekecha. So that's the question that he asks in the beginning of chapter 9. Do we have time to get into the question or no?
Yeah.
Oh, we have 8 months. Perfect. Okay. So let's keep going here. So third line of chapter 9. And even though this idea of that Anoichi becomes Elikecha, that this highest level Anoichi, it's not a level, it's Anoichi, it's the Eibusher's essence, you can't even call it a level. It becomes Elikecha, that is K'moishin Nimshach B'Havaya, as it goes through Havaya. The Rebbe Rashab in his Maimer that we're quoting from here basically contrasts Tshuva and the other mitzvahs in this way. He's trying to bring out the how Tshuva is greater than the other mitzvahs, and he actually makes this point. He says that Tshuva is higher than mitzvahs. What's one of the ways we see Tshuva is higher than mitzvahs? Because that all the other mitzvahs go through Anoichi Havaya Lekecha. But Tshuva is just Anoichi, without going through Havaya, without going through any other levels. So it's Anoichi, as he is Anoichi, is Elekecha. But with regard to Matan Torah, what's Anoichi mean? Anoichi, as he is within Havaya, is Elekecha. But what about Anoichi himself? With regard to Tshuva, it says Anoichi Mitzavcha, Anoichi Stam, just plain Anoichi, without Havaya. But with regard to all the other mitzvahs, it says Anoichi Havaya, I Havaya. Anoichi K'moishin Nimshach B'Havaya, Anoichi as he is drawn into Havaya. Which would seem to imply that with regard to the other mitzvahs, which level of Anoichi, of the Eibishter's essence, can we reach through Torah mitzvahs? The level of Anoichi simply as it's within Havaya, as it comes into Havaya, as Anoichi, as the Eibishter comes to be a creator, or to have some kind of connection with reality. But as the Eibishter is removed from reality, that seems to be out of bounds or beyond. Nevertheless, based on what is known, that in the midst the dibur, the first dibur of Anoichi, all the mitzvahs are included, gam mitzvahs shuva, including mitzvahs shuva, yashlema sheba Anoichi havaya sheba Torah nichol gam bechinas Anoichi kameishu ba'atzmusay. So we could say that even in the Anoichi havaya, which was said by Matan Torah, that includes also the mitzvah of tshuva, meaning the level of Anoichi as he's on his own, higher than as he is in Havaya. It's just that this is revealed through tshuva. So, it says that we heard the first two of the 10 commandments were Hashem said, we heard them from Hashem, right? And then we had to hear the other 8 from Moshe Rabbeinu. So why is it? The Alter Rebbe discussed this in Tanya, which we had quoted earlier in the Maimer. Why is it that we heard the first 2 from Hashem and the other 8 from Moshe? So because we couldn't handle it. Hearing it from God Himself was too intense for us. It says, we couldn't handle it. So if that's the case, didn't God know that initially? Wouldn't God have known that we couldn't handle it? So why didn't we just hear it all together from Moshe? And also, if we couldn't handle it, why did we hear 2? Just listen, just 1. After 1, we should have learned that lesson. Why 2? So the explanation is, because all of the mitzvahs are included in the first 2 commandments. As Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that all the mitzvahs, that the Anoichi Hashem Lekecha, the first mitzvah of the 10 commandments, I am God, your God, belief in God, or however you want to define that mitzvah, exactly what that mitzvah is, that is the source of all mitzvahs haseh, and lo yeh lecha, not to have any other gods, that's the source of all the mitzvahs leisaseh. In other words, and he explains, what motivates you to do a mitzvah? What motivates you to put on tefillin? What should motivate you? The fact, or what are you expressing when you put on tefillin? Besides the specific details of the mitzvah of tefillin, you're basically professing your belief in God, that God commands you to put on tefillin, and God's oneness. Therefore you put on tefillin. So it's motivated by Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. And every time you don't violate any of the commandments, what are you saying? I don't want to serve any other power other than God. I have my own my inclination and my desires. I don't want to empower them. The only power, the only authority is God. God says don't do it, so I don't do it. But when I do, give in to temptation, or I give in to outside influences, or outside opinions other than God's, in a certain way, I'm actually violating that second commandment of not to worship any other gods. I'm ascribing power to something other than God. Okay. So therefore, hearing the first 2 commandments from Hashem is like hearing all of the mitzvahs. It's essentially as if we heard everything from Hashem. But really, beyond that, all the mitzvahs, it says all of the Torah are included in the commandment Anoichi. Mitzvahs Hashem is all of it is included just in that dibur Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. So when Hashem says Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, and Anoichi, the first word of the Asar Dibros, that includes all of the mitzvahs. But more related to what we're talking about here. When Hashem says Anochi Hashem Elikecha, even just being the source of all the positive commandments, that includes the mitzvah of tshuva. So how could, if tshuva is on a higher level than all the other mitzvahs, and tshuva acts as Anochi beyond as it's Anochi Havaya, as Anochi comes into Havaya, so how could tshuva be included in the statement Anochi Havaya Lekecha? It's higher than it. If tshuva is an expression of Anochi Stam, just Anochi, not as Anochi, not as God's essence comes into Havaya, so then how could tshuva be included in the statement Anochi Havaya Lekecha, Anochi as it comes into Havaya? So we must say then that really, even when we say Anochi Havaya Lekecha, what's included in that statement? Not just Anochi as it is in Havaya, as it comes into Havaya, but also Anochi as it's on its own, which is the way tshuva operates, accessing Anochi as it's Anochi, beyond Havaya, because that's included in that statement. If that's the case, so that's, even though that's the case, so then why is tshuva singled out elsewhere? Because this idea of Anochi Stam is expressed through the mitzvah of tshuva. Tshuva is unique in that tshuva bears this point out more so than in other mitzvahs. But already in the statement Anochi Havaya Lekecha, Anochi as he comes into Havaya, that's already included. That includes within it not only Anochi, the level of Anochi as it comes into Havaya, but also the level of Anochi as it is on its own beyond Havaya. Very over the top. Should we quit while we're ahead here?
No, I think it was fantastic.
Yeah.
No, I
Okay.
don't know.